So welcome to Ready for the Weekend episode 9 here at the Plate Sport YouTube channel. My name is Liam and this is the show where myself and Kev go through our predictions for the weekend's must-see sporting action. Coming up this weekend we have action in MMA, rugby, cricket and football. We hope you enjoy. Right, so we are kicking off this week's show with the Cage Warriors 125 main event as Ian Garry takes on Jack Grant for the Cage Warriors welterweight title. Super interesting fight here. You've got like one of the biggest, most hyped prospects in Europe, and this is sort of being treated as a bit of a coronation for him. Ian Garry, Irish fighter, 6-0 record. Last 5 fights have all been finishes inside 2 rounds, and his win in the semi-final of this tournament was beating Rostam Akman in a real showcase performance for him against a former UFC fighter. Jack Grant, on the other hand, 17-6 record, much more experience than Ian Garry, has challenged twice for the Cage Warriors lightweight title, losing both times. They were his last 2 losses. But he was sort of hyped up as being uniquely strong at 155 pounds, so could very much be a guy that could transition to welterweight quite well. We will just have to wait and see. The belt has been vacant since Mason Jones left it to go and join the UFC, but I really am leaning Ian Garry here. He's bigger, he is probably going to be stronger, even though Jack Grant was a hugely powerful lightweight fighter. I don't think he's going to be able to cope with what Ian Garry has to offer. Been quite a while since we've seen him challenged, getting through people in 2 rounds or less. But yeah, I'm taking Ian Garry by stoppage here. I think 2, maybe 3 rounds. And we're going to have a very, very impressive talent who could either jump to the UFC then with a 7-0 record and the Cage Warriors belt on his resume, or we could see him sort of dominate the European scene for a little bit longer before jumping to the UFC or Bellator.
In the Cage Warriors 125, we have Ian Garry versus Jack Grant, 2 fighters with similar fighting abilities. You can see from their fights there are a lot of bursts of energy from both of them, but Ian Garry will probably be more physical, more threatening, and then even though both of them are very good wrestlers as well, I probably would give it to Ian Garry because you can see from his previous opponents he just dominated him. Now he is against a tough opponent, so I wouldn't say it was a knockout, but I would say I would go for the win. But can't wait to see what happens here.
Alright, so our second event of the weekend, we are returning to rugby as the Lions warm up for their tour of South Africa against Japan at Murrayfield. First Lions activity since 2017. They're going to be led by Alan Wynne-Jones and coached by Warren Gatland once again. Great to see they're going to have 16,500 fans in attendance here. And really interestingly, there's a potential truckload of debutants for the Lions here, as 8 players look set to make their debut for them, including the Irish trio of Tyke Byrne, Jack Conan and Bundy Aki. They're going to be without a couple of key players as the Exeter Chiefs members of the squads are away playing the Premiership final, and this is all the build-up before their July 3rd game in South Africa as they face a domestic side. While this is going to be a very, very fun watch, I don't see this being hugely competitive. I think it's a very big sort of winnable, confidence-building, unity-building game for the Lions before they get really tested out in South Africa. Again, the domestic games are probably going to be quite similar to this as well, but they're majorly going to be tested by South Africa as reigning World Cup champions, of course, but I think they're probably going to get a fairly heavy win here against Japan. I'm going to go like the Lions by more than like 12 points, say, as my prediction. But yeah, this should be a really fun watch. Great to have the Lions back again, and be a great chance to go and see a couple of guys break through into this team here. But yeah, I think we're going to see the Lions run out by winners by a fairly decent margin here.
We have Lions versus Japan in their first game since 2017. Majority of the squad consists of a lot of Wales players, probably due to their previous wins in the Six Nations. I wouldn't give Japan a loss here because they've been very dominant in the previous years when they beat big teams like South Africa and Ireland. However, the Lion squad is very dominant. You can see from the majority of the players very decent. But we still have newcomers like Tyke Byrne from the Irish squad, well deserved to be in there. So I don't think it was going to be a massive win, but I think the Lions would actually get the win from that one.
Okay, so we are sticking with rugby next as we are going to the under-20s Six Nations as Wales take on Ireland. Very much an Irish theme to the opening of this week's show. Last time they played each other at this age group, it was a 36-22 win for Ireland. Both teams won their opening game of the tournament, Ireland beating Scotland convincingly 38-7, whereas Wales also getting a convincing win, but not quite to the same level as they beat Italy 25-8. Haven't seen either game. I saw some of the highlights. Both teams look very superior to the sides they were playing. Obviously, the scorelines give credit to that as well. But Ireland's Shane Jennings won the award for try of the round. Over 50% of the vote was a ground breaking down the left-hand side, beat a couple of challenges and took it home for the try. I'm going to lean Ireland here purely on the basis that they had the more convincing win over what was probably a higher standard in opposition in Scotland over Italy, who Wales beat. Again, I think this could be quite close though. I'm gonna say, maybe like a 24-14 win. A big enough margin to be comfortable, but not enough that it's a blowout. So yeah.
We've got more rugby. We've got Ireland versus Wales. Ireland currently top of the table after the first win, after getting the bonus point against Scotland. All the fixtures are going to be held in Wales, so might be a little bit of home advantage for Wales. However, Ireland have previously won their 2 Six Nations over the past 2 years. Majority of those players are still on the squad. They seem to be very dominant. You can see it from the previous fixture against Scotland. Wales is a very good opponent, so I wouldn't say it would be a big marginal win, but I would definitely give the win for Ireland. But again, we'll see how it goes. It's going to be a very good match.
Okay, so I finally get my revenge on Kev for making me cover and research the GAA for a couple of weeks, as I am finally getting him to cover the cricket as England take on Sri Lanka in the third of their T20 games. This was supposed to be my revenge last week with the World Test Championship, but we were both too busy to get the recording done, so this week I get to add to it. Right, so England absolutely ran away with the opening game of the series, and I am currently half watching the second game as they are attempting to blow it horrendously. Chasing down 112, they're currently 30 for 3 at the time of recording this, as they've basically chucked away wickets in the opening section of their innings. Sri Lanka coming off a 2-1 series loss to the West Indies, so not in fantastic form. England, the current world number 1, Sri Lanka considerably lower in 8th place. This is an England team that is fairly stacked, but seems to be trying to throw things away, as they almost get a run out. You got Milan, who is ranked number 1 in the world, still may not be by the time this game runs around after he was dismissed for 4, as well as having Rashid 4th in the bowling rankings. Sri Lanka not as blessed in the batting department, but do have 2 bowlers in Sandakan and De Silva who are just inside the top 10 in the bowling rankings. This is very much gearing up for the T20 World Cup in October in India. England very much have their eyes on that, as well as the Ashes. It's a huge winter for them. But yeah, having seen the first innings, or the first game, and now the halfway through the second game, I don't think Sri Lanka have enough to bother them in English conditions. So I think England probably get the win in this one here, getting over the line. They need like 70 odd runs, but probably take the 3-0 win in this series fairly convincingly. The Sri Lankans not as strong as they once were, but I do think England have enough to get over the line here with a pretty decent result to build on their hopes of the T20 World Cup.
In the cricket, we have England versus Sri Lanka. England hoping to redeem itself after their loss against India. from looking at their stats, obviously both teams gearing up for the World Cup, so obviously they want to get a really good start to get into it. I'll be more looking for England for a win for not just their second, but also their third match. But again, we'll see how that turns out.
Okay, so we wrap up this week's show with our pick from the round of 16 Euros games over the weekend as Wales take on Denmark. Now, this is last in the list because we were sort of waiting to see what got finalised for the weekend, and we still ended up picking the one that was already confirmed. Classic. So Wales advanced, finishing second in Group A. Super solid defensive team with reliance on a couple of superstar players in Bale and Ramsey, as well as one of my favourite breakout players of the tournament in Kiefer Moore, a guy, despite playing in the Championship, that I wasn't overly familiar with. They're going to be without Ampadu, who of course got sent off against Italy in a contentious but probably deserved red card. Denmark also finished second in their group, only managing 3 points, having lost to Belgium and Finland before getting a big win over Russia to get them second place on goal difference. Again, very solid defensively, have probably more household names overall than Wales, but don't have that sort of world-class talent that really sets them apart from everybody else. They're a good, well-drilled team that just don't have those players that can change things at will, especially without Christian Eriksen, but let's really not go into that too much. Defensive midfielder Højbjerg of Tottenham actually leads the tournament in assists right now, which is a slightly odd stat, but very impressive. A player that quietly goes about his business, but as seen here, gets results. Game's going to be held in Amsterdam, so neither team really has advantage conditions or home advantage wise, so depends really on in the ground whether many of either sets of fans are able to travel there or not. I know Wales fans got to Baku, whether they can then get into Amsterdam, I don't know. Denmark have beaten Wales in their last 3 meetings, but none of them were overly recent to really factor in on form or, having won over the opposition or anything like that. Just really because they're sort of become a second team of mine just through really enjoying them play, I'm going to back Wales here. I think this is going to be a very tight game, 1 goal separating, but I'm going to say a 1-0 win for Wales here, with one of Ramsey or Bale really coming up trumps and creating or scoring for them to get them over the line here and to get them into the final 8. I mean, they had a great run to the semi-final last Euro, so why not? I mean, it would be a great story if Denmark could get a real good run of form here and go on a bit of a run, but I'm going to lean Wales here, and I'm going to say 1-0.
In the Euro last 16, we have Wales versus Denmark. Wales doing very well, although I would say they were very reliant on their 2 main stars, Gareth Bale and Ramsey. But apart from those 2 players, still doing pretty well. Up against Denmark, who had a bit of a roller coaster ride so far in the Euros. Despite only getting 3 points in the table, they came out second. Of course, nearly the whole country, even the whole of Europe, are actually supporting Denmark due to their mentality of could have lost their teammate Eriksen in the field. Of course, we're still proud of them. We still keep going despite everything that's happened in the tournament. So I'll probably go for Denmark, but maybe not just because of their performance, but just because we want to see them doing well. I really want them to do well. However, without Eriksen, their team might lack a few players that might actually help to get them the win. But of course, you never know what happens. We'll see. Euros are full of surprises, so we'll see how it goes.
Okay, so that wraps up episode 9, a week later than it should have been, but hey, what can you do? Fortunately, after week 8, through some bang-on predictions for a change, I actually took the lead over Kev due to some bonus points for getting some stuff exactly right. So, first time in 9 episodes, I'm actually in front of him. I think there's only 1 point in it. Scores would have been at the start of the video anyway, so who cares? Anyway, like, subscribe, comment below with some stuff you'd like to see us cover in the future. Let us know your predictions for this weekend. But until then,